The cold Montana rain pelted down on Beatrice Graves as she trudged along the muddy road, one hand clutching her shawl tightly around her shoulders, the other protectively cradling the small swell of her stomach. Her heart ached more than her weary feet as the words of her father echoed in her mind. "No daughter of mine will bring such shame upon this house. You are no longer welcome here." Montana Territory, 1876. The town of Silver Creek had been her home for all of her 20 years. Now, as the downpour soaked through her threadbare dress, Beatrice knew she was truly alone. Thomas, the bank manager's son who had promised her the world in whispered declarations of love, had vanished at the first mention of her condition. Her family, pillars of the community and devout churchgoers, had chosen their reputation over their own flesh and blood. "Just keep walking," Beatrice whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the rain. The next town was Mill Creek, perhaps 15 miles ahead. She had a cousin there, though they hadn't spoken in years. It was her only hope. A sudden clap of thunder startled her, and Beatrice's foot slipped in the mud. She fell hard, landing on her side, instinctively curling around her belly. Pain shot through her hip as she struggled to rise, the mud now caking her dress and hands. The sound of hoofbeats approached from behind, and Beatrice's heart raced with fear. Travelers on this lonely stretch of road weren't always the friendly sort. She scrambled to her feet as a horse and rider came into view through the rain. The rider slowed his horse to a stop beside her. From beneath the wide brim of a rain-soaked hat, concerned blue eyes studied her. "Madam, you all right?" His voice was deep, with a slight drawl that marked him as not being from these parts. Beatrice looked up at the stranger, trying to appear stronger than she felt. "I'm fine, sir. Just lost my footing is all." The man dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his tall, lean frame. His clothes were worn but clean denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest. A gun belt hung at his hip, marking him as someone familiar with the rougher side of frontier life. "You're soaked through and covered in mud. Where you headed in this weather?" He approached cautiously, keeping a respectful distance. "Mill Creek," Beatrice replied, pushing a strand of wet brown hair from her face. "I have family there." The stranger's expression turned grim. "Mill Creek's a good 12 miles from here." "You'll catch your death before you make it half that far in this storm." He glanced at the darkening sky. "My name's Lucas Young. I've got a small cabin about a mile up that trail, nothing fancy, but it's dry. You're welcome to wait out the storm there." Beatrice hesitated, eyeing the stranger warily. He seemed decent enough, but she'd learned the hard way that men's intentions weren't always honorable. Reading her uncertainty, Lucas added, "I give you my word as a gentleman, madam. No harm will come to you under my roof. I can sleep in the barn if it makes you more comfortable." A particularly strong gust of wind cut through Beatrice's wet clothing, causing her to shiver violently. The baby. She had to think of the baby now. "Thank you, Mr. Young," she finally said. "I'd be grateful for shelter until the storm passes." Lucas nodded, then reached for his horse's reins. "Can you ride? You can take Lightning and I'll walk alongside." "I can ride, but I won't take your horse while you walk in this mud." A small smile cracked Lucas's serious expression. "Stubborn, aren't you? All right then." He mounted his horse with ease, then extended his hand down to her. "We'll ride double." Beatrice hesitated only briefly before taking his hand. With surprising gentleness for a man his size, Lucas helped her up behind him. "Hold on tight, madam. Trail gets a bit rough." As she cautiously placed her hands on his sides, Lucas clicked his tongue and the horse started forward. They rode in silence for several minutes, the only sounds the steady rhythm of hoofbeats and the patter of rain. "I don't believe I caught your name, madam," Lucas said over his shoulder. Beatrice Graves." "Well, Miss Graves, that's my place up ahead." Through the curtain of rain, Beatrice could make out a modest cabin with smoke curling from the chimney. Beside it stood a small barn and corral. It wasn't much, but to her cold, tired body, it looked like heaven. Lucas guided his horse to the front of the cabin and dismounted before helping Beatrice down. Her legs felt wobbly beneath her after the ride. "Go on inside," he said, nodding toward the door. "Fire's still going." "I'll see to lightning and be right in." Beatrice didn't need to be told twice. She hurried to the door, pushing it open to find a simple but tidy one-room cabin. A stone fireplace along one wall provided both heat and light, casting a warm glow over a rough-hewn table and chairs, a small kitchen area, and a bed tucked in the corner. It was sparse, but clean and orderly. She moved closer to the fire, grateful for its warmth as she attempted to wring water from her sodden skirt. Minutes later, the door opened and Lucas entered, removing his wet hat and coat. "You must be freezing in those wet clothes," he said matter-of-factly. He crossed to a trunk at the foot of his bed and pulled out a flannel shirt and a pair of trousers. "These will be too big, but they're dry. You can change behind that screen." He nodded toward a wooden folding screen in the corner. "I'll make us some coffee." Beatrice accepted the clothes with murmured thanks and slipped behind the screen. As she peeled off her wet dress, she suddenly became acutely aware of her condition. The small but unmistakable swell of her stomach would be obvious in a man's shirt. She bit her lip, wondering what Lucas would think when he realized she was with child and alone. She changed quickly, rolling up the sleeves and pant legs of the oversized clothes. When she emerged, Lucas was at the stove, his back to her as he poured coffee into 2 tin cups. "Mr. Young," she began hesitantly. "I should tell you," he turned, and his eyes immediately went to her midsection where her hand rested protectively. The borrowed shirt did little to hide her condition. His expression remained neutral, but Beatrice braced herself for judgment or, worse, a change in his demeanor. Instead, he simply handed her a cup of coffee. "Sugar's on the table if you want it. I've got some stew warming too. You should eat something." Surprised by his lack of reaction, Beatrice accepted the coffee. "Thank you." Lucas motioned to the table. "Sit. You look dead on your feet." Beatrice sank gratefully into a chair, cradling the warm cup between her hands. Lucas ladled stew into 2 bowls, setting one in front of her before taking the seat opposite. "So," he said after they'd eaten in silence for a few minutes, "Mill Creek, you said, you have kin there." "A cousin," Beatrice replied. "I haven't seen her in years, but she's the only family I have now who might take me in." Lucas's gaze was direct but not unkind. "The father of your child, he's not in the picture, I take it." Beatrice's cheeks flushed with shame. "No, he left town when he learned of my condition." "Coward," Lucas said quietly, almost to himself. Then, louder, "And your family, my father is the minister in Silver Creek when he learned I was." She couldn't bring herself to say the words. "He said I had brought shame upon our house. My mother didn't speak up for me. They gave me until sundown to pack my things and leave." Lucas's jaw tightened. "They cast you out, in your condition, with a storm coming." Beatrice stared into her coffee. "They said my sin was too great to be overlooked, that I would be a bad influence on my younger sisters." "Some Christian charity," Lucas muttered, his voice softened as he looked at her. "How far along are you?" "Nearly 4 months." Lucas nodded, thoughtful. "And this cousin in Mill Creek, you're certain she'll take you in?" "No," Beatrice admitted, "but I have nowhere else to go." Lucas was quiet for a long moment, seeming to weigh something in his mind. Finally, he spoke. "I've got a proposition for you, Miss Graves. You don't know me, and I don't know you, but I'd like to think I'm a decent judge of character. You seem like a good woman in a bad situation." Beatrice looked at him warily. "What sort of proposition?" "A marriage of convenience." He held up a hand when she started to protest. "Hear me out. You need a home, security, and a name for your child. I've got this place. It's not much, but it's something. I work as a ranch hand at the Diamond K, make decent wages. I keep to myself mostly, but I've been thinking it's time to settle down proper." "You can't be serious," Beatrice said, astonished. "You would marry a fallen woman carrying another man's child?" Lucas's eyes met hers steadily. "You were cast out for being with child. Well, I say then that child will have a father. I won't lie to you, I'm not offering romance or grand passion, but I will offer respect, protection, and my name. Your child would grow up as a young with no one the wiser." But why? Beatrice asked, genuinely bewildered. Why would you do this for a stranger? Lucas was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. My mother found herself in a similar situation when she was young. No one stepped up for her. She died trying to birth me alone in a shack outside of San Antonio. A midwife found us, saved me, raised me as her own. His eyes refocused on Beatrice. I've always thought if just one decent man had helped her, things might have been different. Beatrice was stunned into silence. The offer was so unexpected, so strange, and yet. Was it any stranger than walking another dozen miles on the hope that a distant cousin might take her in? You don't need to answer now, Lucas said, rising from the table. Storm's not letting up anytime soon. You can have the bed tonight. I'll make a pallet by the fire. Think on it and we can talk more in the morning. Mr. Young, Lucas, he corrected. If we're discussing marriage, you might as well use my given name. Lucas, Beatrice repeated, the name unfamiliar on her tongue. I don't know what to say nothing tonight. Rest. It's been a long day for you. He gathered a blanket and pillow from the bed. Tomorrow's soon enough for decisions. As Beatrice lay in Lucas's bed that night, listening to the rain drumming on the roof and his steady breathing from across the room, she placed a hand on her stomach and whispered a quiet prayer. She had no illusions about love. That dream had died when Thomas abandoned her. But perhaps in this stranger's unexpected kindness, she might find something just as valuable: safety, respect, and a future for her child. Morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having blown itself out overnight. Beatrice woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Lucas stood at the stove, his back to her. Morning, he said without turning. Hope you're hungry. Beatrice sat up, smoothing her borrowed clothes. I am, thank you. They ate breakfast in companionable silence. Afterward, as Lucas poured them each another cup of coffee, he said, Have you thought about my proposition? Beatrice met his gaze. I have. It's a generous offer, but I barely know you. Fair enough, Lucas nodded. What would you like to know? Over the next hour, Beatrice learned that Lucas was 30 years old, had worked as a ranch hand, a scout for the army, and briefly as a deputy in a small town in Texas. He'd fought for the Union in the final year of the war, despite being raised in Texas. He'd been at the Diamond K Ranch for 3 years now, saved enough to buy this small homestead, and had plans to start his own modest cattle operation one day. Why haven't you married before now? Beatrice asked. Lucas shrugged. Never found the right woman, I suppose. Ranch life doesn't offer much opportunity for courting, and most women want more than a man who spends his days smelling of cattle and dust. And you're truly willing to claim another man's child as your own, to raise it, care for it. I am, Lucas said simply. A child deserves a father, regardless of how it came to be. People will talk, Beatrice warned. If we suddenly appear married with me already showing. We'll say we married in Silver Creek before coming here, that you're my new bride from back east. No one here knows differently. Beatrice studied him, this strange, honorable man who was offering her salvation. And what would you expect? Of me? She asked quietly, understanding her meaning. Lucas's expression grew serious. I would expect you to keep a good home, to be a partner in building a life here. As for marital relations. He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. That would be entirely up to you. I'd never force anything. We could live as husband and wife in name only, if that's what you prefer. Beatrice was touched by his consideration. Most men would have assumed certain rights came with marriage, and if I were to agree, when would this happen? There's a justice of the peace in Humboldt, about 10 miles west. We could ride there today, be back by nightfall as man and wife. Lucas paused. But I want you to be sure, Beatrice. This isn't a decision to make lightly. Beatrice looked around the small cabin, then back at the man across from her. She had limited options, that much was clear. She could continue to Mill Creek and throw herself on the mercy of a cousin who might turn her away. Or she could accept this stranger's offer, an arrangement based not on love or passion, but on mutual need and respect. Yes, she finally said, her voice steadier than she expected. I accept your proposal, Lucas. A look of relief crossed his face. "All right then, let's get ready. We've got a ride ahead of us." 2 hours later, Beatrice sat behind Lucas on his horse, heading toward Humboldt. He'd found one of his shirts that was a bit smaller, and with her dress now dried, she looked presentable enough for a quick wedding. The morning sun was warm on her face, a stark contrast to yesterday's cold rain. It felt like an omen, though whether good or bad she couldn't say. Humboldt, Nevada was a growing mining town, larger and busier than Silver Creek. As they rode down the main street, Beatrice felt eyes on them. She kept her head high, though her stomach fluttered with nerves. The justice of the peace, a rotund man named Judge Wilson, raised an eyebrow at the hasty ceremony they requested but asked no questions when Lucas pressed a gold coin into his palm. 2 shopkeepers were called in as witnesses, and within 20 minutes, Beatrice Graves became Beatrice Young in a ceremony utterly devoid of romance or celebration. "Well, Mrs. Young," Lucas said as they left the judge's office, "should we have a meal before heading back?" "Consider it our wedding breakfast." Beatrice nodded, feeling strangely detached from the momentous step she'd just taken. They found a small cafe where Lucas ordered steak and eggs for both of them. As they waited for their food, an uncomfortable silence fell between them. "I want to thank you," Beatrice finally said. "What you've done for me, for us." She placed a hand on her stomach. "No need for thanks, we're helping each other," Lucas replied. "I've been alone a long time, it'll be good to have a home with someone in it." Their food arrived, momentarily relieving the awkwardness. As they ate, Lucas seemed to be gathering his thoughts. "There's something I should tell you," he said finally, "about my past." Beatrice looked up, concern flickering across her face. "What is it?" "Nothing terrible," he assured her. "But you should know I was married once before, briefly." "Oh," Beatrice set down her fork. "What happened?" Her name was Sarah. "We married young, just 18. She died of fever less than a year later." His voice was even, but Beatrice could sense the old pain behind it. "It was a long time ago." "I'm sorry," Beatrice said softly. "Did you love her very much?" A sad smile crossed Lucas's face. "We were little more than children, really, but yes, in our way we loved each other." He met Beatrice's eyes directly. "I'm telling you this because I want us to start honest. No secrets between us." Beatrice nodded, appreciating his candor. "No secrets," she agreed. "Though I'm afraid my story isn't very interesting. I grew up in Silver Creek, daughter of the minister, led a sheltered life until—" She faltered. "Until you fell in love," Lucas suggested gently. "I thought it was love," Beatrice admitted. "Thomas, that was his name, he worked at his father's bank. He was handsome, educated, said he wanted to marry me, take me to San Francisco. I believed him." She looked down at her plate. "When I told him about the baby, he said I must have been with someone else, that he wouldn't be trapped by a scheming woman." Lucas's jaw tightened. "Some men don't deserve the name." "My father always preached about sin and punishment," Beatrice continued. "I never thought I'd be the one he cast out. My mother just stood there, crying but saying nothing." The memory still had the power to hurt. "My youngest sister, Emma, she's only 12. She slipped me some money as I was leaving. That's all I have, $3.27. "You have more than that now," Lucas said firmly. "You have a home and a husband for whatever that's worth." Their eyes met across the table, 2 strangers bound now by law and circumstance. There was no love between them, not yet, but Beatrice felt something equally powerful: hope. The ride back to the cabin was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. The reality of what they'd done was starting to sink in for Beatrice. She had married a man she'd known for less than a day. The desperate gamble of it struck her suddenly, and she tightened her grip around Lucas's waist. "You all right back there?" he asked over his shoulder. "Yes," she replied, though her voice wasn't entirely steady, "just taking it all in." By the time they reached the cabin, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Lucas helped her down from the horse, his hands strong and sure at her waist. For a moment they stood close, almost awkwardly, before he stepped back. "I'll see to lightning. Make yourself at home. It's your home now, too." Inside, Beatrice looked around the cabin with new eyes. As Lucas's wife, this was indeed her home now. She removed her shawl and hung it on a peg by the door, a simple act that somehow made her presence official. Moving about the small space, she began to tidy up, straightening the blankets Lucas had used by the fire, washing the breakfast dishes they'd left behind. When Lucas entered some time later, he paused in the doorway watching her work. "You didn't have to do that," he said. Beatrice turned, a small smile on her face. "I'm your wife now, it's my place to keep our home." Lucas nodded, then reached into his pocket. "Almost forgot, got you something in town." He held out a simple gold band. "It's not fancy, but a married woman should have a ring." Beatrice stared at the ring, oddly touched by the gesture. She extended her left hand and Lucas slid the band onto her finger. It was slightly loose, but it would do. "Thank you," she said softly. An awkward moment followed as they stood facing each other, newly wed but virtually strangers. "I should start supper," Beatrice said finally, breaking the tension. Lucas nodded. "I'll bring in more firewood." They moved around each other carefully that evening, establishing boundaries without words. When night fell, Lucas again prepared to sleep by the fire. "You take the bed," he said firmly when Beatrice protested. "It's no hardship for me to sleep here. It's your bed in your home," Beatrice argued. "I can't take it from you. Our home," Lucas corrected. "And you're carrying a child, you need proper rest." Beatrice relented, though it felt wrong to take the only bed while her husband slept on the floor. "This can't be a permanent arrangement," she said as she settled under the covers. "We'll need to figure something else out." "We will," Lucas agreed. "But for now, this works. Good night, Mrs. Young." The name, so new to her ears, sent a strange flutter through Beatrice's chest. "Good night, husband." In the darkness, she thought she saw him smile. The next morning brought new adjustments. Lucas rose early, as was his habit, to tend to his horse and the few chickens he kept. When he returned to the cabin, Beatrice had breakfast waiting, eggs and bacon, with coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in just as he liked it. "I need to go into the ranch today," Lucas said as they ate. "Tell the foreman about our marriage. He's a good man, Joe Keller, won't give us any trouble." "Will I meet him?" Beatrice asked, suddenly nervous about facing strangers who might judge her. "Eventually," Lucas said. "But for now, why don't you settle in here, get familiar with the place? I've got some seed packets in that drawer if you want to start a kitchen garden." "The soil's good by the south wall." Beatrice nodded, grateful for the task. "I'd like that. I've always enjoyed gardening." "I'll be back by sundown," Lucas promised, rising from the table. He paused, seemingly unsure whether to offer some gesture of affection. In the end, he simply nodded and headed for the door. "Lucas," Beatrice called after him. When he turned, she said, "Be safe." A small smile touched his lips. "Always am." Alone in the cabin, Beatrice set about making it truly her home. She swept and scrubbed, organized the meager kitchen supplies, and took inventory of the pantry. Lucas kept things neat, but it was clear a woman's touch had been absent. She found the seed packets he'd mentioned, beans, carrots, tomatoes, and spent the afternoon clearing a small plot by the south wall. As she worked, her hand occasionally went to her stomach, feeling the small but definite swell of new life. "We have a home now, little one," she whispered. "And a good man to call father." The thought brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Whatever his reasons, Lucas had shown her kindness when she needed it most. She would work hard to be a good wife to him, to make this strange arrangement into something real and lasting. True to his word, Lucas returned as the sun was setting. He paused by the garden plot, noting the freshly turned earth and neat rows where Beatrice had planted seeds. "You've been busy," he remarked as he entered the cabin. Beatrice looked up from the stew she was stirring. "I hope you don't mind." "I rearranged some things." Lucas glanced around, noting the subtle changes, the dishes arranged more neatly, a wildflower bouquet on the table, his books stacked by size on the shelf. "It looks good," he said honestly. "Smells good too." "Rabbit stew," Beatrice explained. "I found the meat you had curing. Hope that was all right. More than all right. It's been a while since I came home to a hot meal." He hung his hat on a peg and moved to wash up at the basin. "How are you feeling? Not too tired from all the work?" The question took Beatrice by surprise. In all the months since discovering her condition, no one had asked after her well-being with such genuine concern. "I'm well," she assured him. "The morning sickness has mostly passed, and it felt good to be useful." Lucas nodded, drying his hands. "Spoke to Mr. Keller today. Told him I'd gotten married. He was surprised, to say the least." "What did you tell him about me?" Beatrice asked, trying to keep her tone light despite her anxiety. "That I'd met you in Silver Creek, courted you proper, and brought you back as my bride." Lucas took a seat at the table. "Said you were from a good family back east, came west to teach but found a husband instead." "And he believed that?" Beatrice asked skeptically. Lucas shrugged. "Don't see why not. Truth is, most of the boys were just shocked I'd found a woman willing to take me. I've got something of a reputation for keeping to myself." "Well, Mr. Young," Beatrice said, setting a bowl of stew in front of him, "it seems we're both full of surprises." That evening passed more comfortably than the previous one. They talked easily over dinner, Lucas telling her about the ranch and the men he worked with, Beatrice sharing her plans for the garden and some improvements she thought might make the cabin more livable. "I was thinking," Lucas said as they finished their meal, "we should build on a small room. Give you a proper kitchen, maybe a space for the baby when it comes." Beatrice looked at him in surprise. "You do that?" "Been meaning to expand anyway," Lucas said, though Beatrice suspected this wasn't entirely true. "No time like the present." "That would be wonderful," Beatrice said sincerely, "but it must be expensive, and I've brought nothing to this marriage except another mouth to feed." "You've brought plenty," Lucas contradicted her. "A home needs a woman's touch, and as for money, I've got savings." "Not much, but enough to add a room or two." He hesitated, then added, "I want to do right by you, Beatrice, and by the child. This may not be a love match, but it can still be a good marriage." Beatrice felt a rush of gratitude. "I think it already is." That night, Lucas again insisted on sleeping by the fire despite Beatrice's protests that the bed was large enough to share. "Plenty of time for that," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "Let's not rush things." Beatrice couldn't deny the relief she felt. Though Lucas had been nothing but respectful, the thought of sharing a bed with a man, any man, still brought back painful memories of Thomas's betrayal. She needed time, and Lucas seemed to understand that without her having to explain. As spring deepened into summer, Beatrice and Lucas settled into a routine. He rode out to the ranch most days, returning by nightfall. Beatrice kept house, tended her growing garden, and made small improvements to their home. She sewed curtains from flour sacks, fashioned a rag rug for the floor, and started planning for the baby's arrival. Lucas kept his word about expanding the cabin. On his days off, he worked steadily, adding a proper kitchen at the back and a small bedroom to the side. Other ranch hands sometimes came to help, curious to meet the woman who had tamed the solitary Lucas Young. Joe Keller, the ranch foreman, was the first to visit, arriving one Sunday with his wife Mary. Beatrice had been nervous about the meeting, but the Kellers were kind and welcoming. "Lucas has been a changed man since you came along," Mary told her as they prepared lunch. "Used to barely say 2 words at a time, now he can't stop talking about you and the baby." Beatrice glanced through the window to where Lucas stood with Joe, discussing the new room addition. "He's a good man," she said softly. Mary studied her with knowing eyes. "Marriage isn't always easy, especially out here, but you two seem well matched." "We're still getting to know each other," Beatrice admitted. "That's half the fun," Mary winked. "Joe and I have been married 15 years, and he still surprises me." As the women talked, Beatrice felt a stirring in her belly, the first definite movements of the child. She gasped softly, her hand flying to her stomach. "The baby?" Mary asked, smiling. Beatrice nodded, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's the first time I've really felt it move." "You should tell Lucas," Mary suggested. "Men don't get to experience much of pregnancy. It means a lot when you share these moments." Later, after the Kellers had gone, Beatrice found the courage to take Mary's advice. Lucas was sitting on the porch, whittling a piece of wood in the evening light. "May I join you?" she asked. He looked up with a smile, setting aside his work. "Always." Beatrice sat beside him on the bench he'd built. For a moment they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold. "Something happened today," Beatrice said finally. "I felt the baby move, really felt it like a flutter inside." Lucas turned to her, his eyes alight with interest. "Is that right? What did it feel like?" "Like butterfly wings," Beatrice described. "Or maybe fish swimming. It's hard to explain." Without thinking, she reached for his hand. Lucas looked surprised but didn't pull away as she placed his palm against the swell of her stomach. "You probably can't feel anything yet from the outside," Beatrice explained, suddenly self-conscious about the intimate gesture. "But someday soon you will." Lucas's hand remained gentle against her belly, his expression one of quiet wonder. "Thank you for sharing this with me," he said softly. In that moment, something shifted between them, a tentative step toward something deeper than their arrangement of convenience. Beatrice felt it like a physical change in the air, and from Lucas's expression, she knew he felt it too. That night, for the first time, they shared the bed. Nothing happened beyond sleep, Lucas keeping carefully to his side, but it marked a new level of comfort and trust between them. As Beatrice drifted off, she realized that in just a few short months, this stranger had become the person she trusted most in the world. July brought stifling heat to the valley. Beatrice's pregnancy was advancing, her belly now a prominent curve that made working in the garden increasingly difficult. Lucas insisted she rest during the hottest part of the day, often returning from the ranch to find her napping in the new rocking chair he'd brought home as a surprise. One evening, as they sat on the porch enjoying a rare, cool breeze, a rider approached their homestead. Lucas stood, instantly alert, his hand moving instinctively to the gun at his hip. As the rider drew closer, Beatrice gasped in recognition. "That's Reverend Warner from Silver Creek," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. "My father's closest friend." Lucas's expression hardened. "What's he doing here?" "I don't know," Beatrice replied, one hand protectively covering her belly. "No one from Silver Creek should even know where I am." The Reverend reined in his horse before their porch, his stern gaze moving from Beatrice to Lucas and back again. "Beatrice Graves," he said, his voice carrying the same sanctimonious tone she remembered from countless sermons. "Your sister Emma has been beside herself with worry. She finally confessed to me that she gave you money when you left." Beatrice stood straighter, finding courage in Lucas's solid presence beside her. "It's Beatrice Young now, Reverend. This is my husband Lucas." Reverend Warner's eyebrows rose. "Married? Well, that's something at least. Though it doesn't erase the sin of conception before wedlock." "You've had a long ride, Reverend," Lucas said, his tone deceptively calm. "State your business and be on your way." The Reverend dismounted, tying his horse to the porch rail. "I've come with a message from your father, Beatrice. He's gravely ill, pneumonia. The doctor doesn't think he'll last the month." Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. Despite everything, the news of her father's illness affected her deeply. "He's asking for you," Reverend Warner continued. "Says he needs to make peace before meeting his maker." Lucas's hand found Beatrice's, squeezing gently in support. "That's for my wife to decide," he said firmly, "but she's in no condition for a long journey right now." The Reverend's gaze settled on Beatrice's rounded belly. "I see the child grows. All the more reason to seek your father's forgiveness while you can." "Forgiveness," Beatrice repeated, anger flaring unexpectedly. "He cast me out in a storm, left me to fend for myself and my unborn child. It seems to me he's the one who should be asking forgiveness." Reverend Warner's expression hardened. "Pride has always been your weakness, Beatrice. Your father is dying. Whatever his mistakes, can you deny him his last request?" Lucas stepped forward, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Reverend, my wife is 5 months with child. It's not safe for her to travel all the way to Silver Creek and back. Your concern for her condition comes rather late, wouldn't you say?" The Reverend replied coldly. Lucas's hand dropped to his gun, his eyes flashing dangerously. Choose your next words very carefully. Beatrice placed a restraining hand on Lucas's arm. It's all right, she said quietly. To the Reverend, she added, tell my father I received his message. Whether I come or not will be my decision, mine and my husband's. Very well, Reverend Warner said stiffly. I'll be in Humboldt until tomorrow noon. You can send word to me at the hotel if you decide to do the Christian thing. With that, he mounted his horse and rode away without looking back. When he was gone, Beatrice's composure crumbled. She sank onto the porch bench, tears streaming down her face. Lucas sat beside her, his arm going awkwardly around her shoulders. You don't have to go, he said gently. No one would blame you for staying away. Beatrice wiped at her tears. He's my father, Lucas. Despite everything, he's still my father. Lucas nodded, understanding in his eyes. If you want to go, then I'm going with you. We'll take the wagon, make sure you're comfortable. But only if you're sure. Beatrice placed her hand over his where it rested on her shoulder. In the 4 months since their hasty marriage, Lucas had never once failed to support her. The contrast between his steadfast presence and her father's rejection couldn't have been starker. I need to see him, she said finally, to make peace not just for him but for myself and for our child. Lucas caught her slip "our child" but didn't comment on it. Instead, he simply nodded. Then we'll leave at first light. That night, as they prepared for bed, Beatrice felt a wave of gratitude for this man who had become so much more than a convenient solution to her problems. Lucas had never pressed her for more intimacy than she was ready to give, had never thrown her situation in her face, had never made her feel less than an equal partner in their marriage. Lucas, she said as he banked the fire for the night, thank you for everything. He turned to look at her, his expression soft in the fading firelight. No need for thanks between us. There is, Beatrice insisted. You've given me so much, a home, security, your name, and you've asked for nothing in return. Lucas crossed to where she stood by the bed. Slowly, giving her every chance to step away, he raised his hand to her cheek. You've given me plenty, Beatrice, more than you know. The tenderness in his touch made her breath catch. For the first time, Beatrice allowed herself to see Lucas not just as her protector, but as a man, a handsome, kind man who looked at her with growing affection in his eyes. On impulse, she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his in a brief, chaste kiss. It lasted only a moment, but when she pulled back, the look of surprise and pleasure on Lucas's face made her heart race. We should sleep, she whispered. Long journey tomorrow. Lucas nodded, clearly still processing what had just happened. Right, sleep. They lay side by side that night, not touching yet more connected than they'd ever been. As Beatrice drifted toward sleep, she felt Lucas's hand find hers in the darkness, his fingers intertwining with hers in a silent promise of support for whatever lay ahead. The journey to Silver Creek took 2 long days by wagon. Lucas had borrowed a covered wagon from the ranch, making a comfortable bed in the back where Beatrice could rest when the jolting of the road became too much. He was attentive to her every need, stopping frequently for her comfort, insisting she drink water even when she wasn't thirsty, and watching her closely for signs of fatigue. As they approached the outskirts of Silver Creek on the evening of the second day, Beatrice felt her anxiety mounting. She hadn't set foot in this town since the day of her banishment, and the prospect of facing not just her family, but the prying eyes and wagging tongues of the townspeople filled her with dread. We don't have to go straight to your parents' house, Lucas said, sensing her unease. We can stay at the hotel tonight, go in the morning when you're rested. Beatrice shook her head. No, best to get it over with. She straightened her dress as best she could, conscious of her obviously pregnant state. Besides, I want them to meet you, to see that I've found a good man. Lucas reached over and squeezed her hand. Whatever happens in there, remember you're not alone anymore. We face it together. The minister's house stood beside the church, a modest white clapboard structure that had once been Beatrice's entire world. Now, as Lucas helped her down from the wagon, it seemed smaller somehow, less imposing than in her memory. Lucas knocked on the door, keeping Beatrice slightly behind him as if to shield her from whatever reception awaited. After a moment, the door opened to reveal Emma, Beatrice's youngest sister. Now 13, she had grown taller in the month since Beatrice had last seen her, her face losing some of its childish roundness. "Bea," Emma cried, throwing herself forward to embrace her sister. "You came, I knew you would." Beatrice returned the hug fiercely, tears springing to her eyes at this unconditional welcome. "Oh, Emma, I've missed you so. And you're—" Emma pulled back, her eyes wide as she took in Beatrice's condition. "The baby's still coming?" "Yes," Beatrice smiled, placing a hand on her belly. "In about 4 months' time." Emma's gaze shifted to Lucas, curiosity evident in her young face. "This is my husband, Lucas Young," Beatrice introduced. "Lucas, this is my sister Emma." Lucas tipped his hat politely. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Emma. Your sister speaks highly of you." Emma beamed at this, then sobered. "Father's very weak. The doctor was here earlier, he said." She trailed off, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "You should come in. Mother is with him now." She led them inside to the parlor where Beatrice's middle sister, Sarah, sat working on embroidery. At their entrance, Sarah looked up, her expression a complicated mix of relief and wariness. "Beatrice," she said, setting aside her work and standing. "You look—" "Well, hello, Sarah," Beatrice replied, the formality between them a painful reminder of how much had changed. "This is my husband, Lucas Young." Sarah nodded stiffly at Lucas. "Mr. Young." An awkward silence fell, broken only when the parlor door opened and Beatrice's mother entered. Grace Graves had aged years in the few months since Beatrice had last seen her. Her hair, once dark like Beatrice's own, was now streaked with gray, and deep lines of worry etched her face. "Beatrice," she breathed, halting in the doorway as if afraid to approach. "You came." "Reverend Warner said Father was asking for me," Beatrice replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Her mother's gaze moved to Lucas, then to Beatrice's rounded belly. Something like regret flickered across her face. "You're married?" she asked softly. "Yes," Beatrice confirmed. "This is my husband, Lucas Young." Lucas stepped forward, offering his hand. "Mrs. Graves." After a moment's hesitation, Grace took his hand. "Thank you for bringing my daughter home, Mr. Young." "How is Father?" Beatrice asked, redirecting the conversation. Grace's expression fell. "Not well. The fever breaks and returns, his lungs." She shook her head. "He's awake now." "The doctor gave him something for the pain. He's been asking for you." Beatrice took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I'd like to see him." "I'll come with you," Lucas said immediately. Grace nodded. "This way." She led them upstairs to the master bedroom. The curtains were drawn against the evening light, and the air was heavy with the smell of illness and medicine. In the large bed that had always seemed to dominate the room, Beatrice's father lay propped against pillows, his once robust frame now shrunken and frail. "Reverend Graves," Grace said softly, "Beatrice is here, and her husband." Micah Graves turned his head slowly, his eyes finding Beatrice in the dimness. For a long moment, he simply stared at her, as if struggling to reconcile the daughter he'd cast out with the obviously pregnant, married woman before him. "Beatrice," he finally said, his voice a shadow of its former authoritative tone. "You came." Beatrice moved to the bedside, Lucas a steadying presence just behind her. "Yes, Father." Up close, she could see how illness had ravaged him. His skin had a grayish pallor, and each breath seemed to require conscious effort. "Your mother, give us a moment," Micah rasped. Grace hesitated, then nodded. "I'll be just outside." She retreated, closing the door softly behind her. Micah's gaze shifted to Lucas. "And you are Lucas Young, sir, Beatrice's husband, the father of her child?" Micah asked directly. Before Lucas could answer, Beatrice spoke firmly. "Lucas is my husband and the father of my child in every way that matters." Micah studied Lucas with unexpected intensity for a man so ill. "You've taken on another man's responsibility." "Why?" Lucas met the older man's gaze steadily. "Because it was the right thing to do, because Beatrice deserved better than to be cast out alone." The rebuke was subtle but clear. Micah closed his eyes briefly as if gathering strength. "I've asked you here to seek forgiveness," he said finally, looking at Beatrice. "What I did. Casting you out in your condition. It was wrong." The admission, so long awaited, brought fresh tears to Beatrice's eyes. "You were my father, I needed you." "I know," Micah whispered. "Pride and fear of scandal made me forget my duty, both as a father and as a minister." He reached out a trembling hand, which Beatrice took after only a moment's hesitation. "Can you forgive an old man's terrible mistake?" Beatrice felt the weight of months of hurt and anger, of lonely nights and uncertain days before Lucas came into her life. Yet holding on to bitterness would only poison her own heart. "I forgive you, Father," she said softly, "but I won't forget, and I won't allow my child to be treated as I was." Micah nodded weakly. "Fair enough." His gaze moved to Lucas again. "You'll care for her, for both of them." "With my life," Lucas promised solemnly. Something like relief crossed Micah's face. "Then I can go in peace." To Beatrice, he added, "Your mother, she wanted to find you, to bring you home, but I wouldn't allow it. Don't hold that against her." "I don't," Beatrice assured him. They stayed a while longer, the conversation turning to lighter topics: Beatrice's new home, her garden, the baby expected in late fall. By the time they left the room, Micah had drifted into an exhausted sleep. Grace was waiting in the hallway. "You'll stay the night?" she asked, a note of pleading in her voice. Beatrice looked to Lucas, who nodded. "We'd be grateful," she replied. That night in Beatrice's childhood bedroom, Lucas held her as she cried for the father she was losing, for the family that had rejected her, and for the strange, winding path that had led her to this man's arms. "He might rally," Lucas said, though they both knew it was unlikely. "People sometimes do." "No," Beatrice shook her head against his chest. "He's making peace with everyone, putting his affairs in order. He knows he's going." Lucas stroked her hair gently. "At least you had this chance, to say goodbye, to forgive." Beatrice looked up at him, her tear-stained face solemn in the moonlight streaming through the window. "Thank you for coming with me, for standing by me." "Where else would I be?" Lucas replied simply. "You're my wife." Something in his tone made Beatrice's heart quicken. There was more than duty in his words, much more. Slowly, she raised her hand to his cheek, tracing the line of his jaw. "Lucas," she whispered, "I think I'm falling in love with you." The confession hung in the air between them, fraught with vulnerability and hope. For a moment, Lucas simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, with infinite gentleness, he lowered his lips to hers. Unlike their first brief kiss, this one deepened, tender yet insistent. When they finally parted, both breathing a little faster, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I fell for you weeks ago," he admitted softly. "Just been waiting for you to catch up." Beatrice smiled through fresh tears, these born of joy rather than sorrow. "We've done everything backwards, haven't we? Marriage first, then friendship, and now love," Lucas finished for her. "And there's nothing wrong with that." In the safety of his embrace, Beatrice found comfort for the grief of her father's impending death, and hope for the future they would build together, a future founded not on convenience or necessity, but on genuine affection and respect that had blossomed into love. Micah Graves passed away 3 days later, slipping peacefully from sleep into death with his family gathered around him. The funeral was held the following day, attended by most of Silver Creek. Beatrice stood between Lucas and her mother, accepting condolences from townspeople who eyed her pregnant belly with poorly disguised curiosity. "People are talking," Sarah murmured to her as they returned to the house after the burial. "They're counting months on their fingers." "Let them talk," Beatrice replied with newfound confidence. "My husband and I know the truth of our marriage." The truth, as it had evolved, was far more complex and beautiful than the arrangement they'd begun with. In the days they'd spent in Silver Creek, Lucas had become truly her husband in every sense, her partner, her protector, and now her love. After the funeral, Grace asked them to stay longer, clearly eager to make amends for her silence when Beatrice needed her most. But both Beatrice and Lucas felt the pull to return to their own home, to the life they were building together. "You're welcome to visit us," Beatrice told her mother as they prepared to depart. "After the baby comes, you should know your grandchild." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I'd like that very much." Emma clung to Beatrice at the last moment. "Take me with you," she begged. "I don't want to stay here without you and Father." Beatrice stroked her sister's hair. "You need to finish your schooling, Emma, but you can visit us soon, I promise, and write to me every week." The return journey to their homestead near Humboldt was slower than the trip to Silver Creek had been. Lucas insisted on frequent stops, concerned about Beatrice's condition after the emotional strain of the past days. "The baby's been kicking up a storm," Beatrice commented during one such rest, her hand pressed to her side. "Here, feel." She guided Lucas's hand to the spot, and his face lit up with wonder as he felt the strong movement beneath his palm. "That's amazing," he marveled. "Strong little thing." "Like its father," Beatrice said softly. Lucas met her gaze, his eyes serious. "I want you to know I'll never treat this child any differently than if it were my own flesh and blood. From the moment it's born, it's a young through and through." "I know," Beatrice said, covering his hand with hers where it rested on her belly. "That's who you are, Lucas, a man of your word. It's one of the many reasons I love you." The words came easier now, the sentiment behind them growing stronger each day. What had begun as gratitude had deepened into genuine admiration, respect, and now a love that surprised her with its intensity. When they finally reached their homestead after 4 days of travel, Beatrice felt a surge of emotion at the sight of the small cabin with its new additions. This was home now, her home with Lucas, where their child would be born and raised. "Welcome home, Mrs. Young," Lucas said, helping her down from the wagon. "It's good to be back," Beatrice replied honestly. Silver Creek, with all its memories both bitter and sweet, was her past. This place, with this man, was her future. The remainder of the summer passed in a comfortable rhythm. Lucas continued his work at the Diamond K Ranch, but arranged with Joe Keller to take time off when the baby came. Beatrice, now in her 3rd trimester, moved more slowly but kept up with her household duties and tended her flourishing garden. Word arrived from Silver Creek that Grace had decided to move east to live with her sister in Boston. She promised to visit after getting settled, though Beatrice wondered if it would actually happen. Some wounds, she was learning, took more than good intentions to heal. Emma, true to her word, wrote faithfully each week, her letters full of news and questions about the baby. Sarah wrote less frequently, but seemed to be warming to the idea of being an aunt. Slowly, in fits and starts, Beatrice was rebuilding relationships with her family, different now, but not entirely lost. As summer gave way to fall, Beatrice's time grew near. Lucas had finished the nursery, a small but cozy room adjoining their bedroom. He'd crafted a cradle with his own hands, and Beatrice had sewn tiny gowns and blankets from fabric purchased in Humboldt. "Do you think it will be a boy or a girl?" Beatrice asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Lucas considered the question seriously. "A girl, I think, with your brown eyes and stubborn chin," Beatrice laughed. "Stubborn? I'm not stubborn. Says the woman who insisted on planting pumpkins, even though everyone said they wouldn't grow in this soil," Lucas teased. "And look at that." He nodded toward the garden where several large pumpkins glowed orange in the fading light. "Well, if it is a girl, I hope she has your kindness," Beatrice said, her tone turning serious. "And your sense of right and wrong." Lucas took her hand, rubbing his thumb across her knuckles. "Boy or girl, this child is lucky. It will be loved." "Yes," Beatrice agreed softly, "it will." The baby came on a crisp October morning, announcing its impending arrival with sharp pains that woke Beatrice from a sound sleep. Lucas, instantly alert at her gasp, was on his feet and pulling on his clothes before she could even explain. "Is it time?" he asked, his voice steady despite the worry in his eyes. Beatrice nodded, gripping the bedsheet as another contraction seized her. "I think so." "I'll get Mary Keller," Lucas said, referring to the foreman's wife who had agreed to act as midwife when the time came. She'll know what to do. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of pain, determination, and Lucas's unwavering support. Though custom dictated men stay away from the birthing room, Lucas refused to leave Beatrice's side, holding her hand, wiping her brow, and murmuring encouragement through each contraction. Mary Keller, experienced from delivering 5 children of her own and helping countless ranch wives, directed the proceedings with calm efficiency. "You're doing fine, Beatrice," she assured her repeatedly. "Everything's progressing just as it should." Finally, as the afternoon sun slanted through the bedroom window, the baby's first cry filled the room, strong, indignant, and perfect. "It's a boy," Mary announced triumphantly. "A fine, healthy boy." Exhausted but elated, Beatrice watched as Mary cleaned the squalling infant and placed him in Lucas's arms. The look on her husband's face, wonder, pride, and unmistakable love brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Lucas," she whispered, "bring him to me." Lucas carefully transferred the tiny bundle to Beatrice's arms, sitting on the edge of the bed to study their son's tiny features. "He's perfect," he said, voice thick with emotion. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a good set of lungs. Beatrice counted each tiny finger herself, marveling at the miniature nails, the impossibly soft skin. The baby had a dusting of dark hair, and when he briefly opened his eyes, they were the deep blue of all newborns. "What shall we name him?" Lucas asked, stroking the baby's cheek with one gentle finger. Beatrice looked up at him, her heart so full it felt it might burst. "I was thinking Michael Lucas Young. Michael was my grandfather's name." "Michael," Lucas repeated, testing the name. "I like it." He leaned down to press a kiss to Beatrice's forehead. "You did amazing, Beatrice. I'm so proud of you." As Mary Keller discreetly tidied up and slipped from the room to give the new family privacy, Beatrice felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. 6 months ago, she had been alone, disgraced, and desperate. Now she had a husband she loved deeply, a beautiful son, and a home filled with happiness. "I never thought I could be this happy," she admitted softly. "When my father cast me out, I thought my life was over, but it was just beginning." Lucas's hand covered hers where it cradled their son. "Sometimes the best things in life come from the hardest moments. When you found me on that road, why did you really stop?" Beatrice asked, a question she'd wondered about but never voiced. Lucas was quiet for a moment. "I saw a woman alone, in need. It was the right thing to do." He paused, then added, "But when you looked up at me with those determined eyes, trying so hard to be brave even though you were soaked through and clearly exhausted, something shifted in me. I couldn't ride away." "I'm glad you didn't," Beatrice whispered. "Me too," Lucas replied, bending to place a gentle kiss on his son's head. "Me too." In the weeks that followed, Lucas and Beatrice settled into the rhythm of parenthood. Michael proved to be a good-natured baby, with a healthy appetite and lungs that let the whole homestead know when he was hungry or wet. Lucas took to fatherhood with natural ease, as comfortable cradling the infant as he was breaking horses at the ranch. He'd rise in the night when Michael cried, changing him before bringing him to Beatrice to nurse, then sitting beside them in the rocking chair, his presence a quiet comfort in the midnight hours. Word spread quickly about the birth, and visitors began to arrive. Joe and Mary Keller with a handmade quilt, other ranch hands with small gifts and hearty congratulations. Each one treated Lucas as Michael's natural father, and he accepted their good wishes with quiet pride. One crisp November morning, as Beatrice was hanging laundry while Michael napped in his cradle on the porch, she spotted a buggy approaching their homestead. As it drew nearer, her heart leapt in recognition. It was Emma, accompanied by Sarah. "Surprise," Emma called as the buggy pulled up. "We've come to meet our nephew." Beatrice rushed forward to embrace her sisters, joy and shock mingling. "What are you doing here? How did you manage the journey alone?" Sarah, more reserved but smiling genuinely, explained. "Mr. Warner accompanied us as far as Humboldt. He had church business there. We hired this buggy for the last leg. Lucas will be so pleased to see you," Beatrice said, leading them toward the house. He's out checking the fence line but should be back soon. We can't stay long, Sarah cautioned. We need to be back in Humboldt by tomorrow noon to meet Reverend Warner for the return journey. Then we'll make the most of today, Beatrice declared. Come, Michael just went down for his nap, but I'm sure the excitement will wake him soon enough. As if on cue, a small cry emanated from the cradle. Emmer rushed forward, peering in with undisguised delight. Oh, Bea, he's beautiful, Beatrice lifted her son, cradling him against her shoulder. Would you like to hold him? Emma nodded eagerly, and Beatrice carefully transferred the baby to her sister's arms, showing her how to support his head. Hello, Michael, Emma cooed. I'm your Aunt Emma. I'm going to spoil you terribly. Even Sarah's reserve melted when it was her turn to hold the baby. He has Mother's chin, she observed softly, and Father's brow. Lucas says he has my stubbornness already, Beatrice laughed. Sarah looked up at this, studying her sister with newfound respect. You look happy, Beatrice, truly happy. I am, Beatrice confirmed. More than I ever thought possible. They spent the afternoon catching up, sharing news from Silver Creek and stories of Michael's first weeks. When Lucas returned, he welcomed the sisters warmly, proudly showing off the improvements he'd made to the homestead. As evening approached, with the sisters preparing to return to Humboldt for the night, Sarah took Beatrice aside. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. When Father cast you out, I should have stood up for you. I was a coward. Beatrice squeezed her sister's hand. You were barely 17, Sarah. Father wasn't an easy man to defy. Still, Sarah insisted. I've regretted my silence every day. Can you forgive me? There's nothing to forgive, Beatrice assured her. We were all doing the best we could in a difficult situation. As they embraced, Beatrice felt another piece of her past heal, another bridge rebuilt. When the sisters finally departed with promises to visit again in the spring, Beatrice stood waving until the buggy disappeared from sight. You all right? Lucas asked, coming up behind her with Michael in his arms. Beatrice turned to her husband and son, her heart full. Never better. That night, after Michael was settled in his cradle, Beatrice and Lucas sat before the fire, his arm around her shoulders as she leaned against him. Sarah asked if I'm truly happy, Beatrice said after a comfortable silence. I told her I am, but that doesn't quite capture it. She turned to look at Lucas, the firelight playing across his features. What I feel is gratitude, for you, for Michael, for this life we're building. Lucas's hand came up to cup her cheek. Do you ever regret it, marrying a stranger, taking such a risk? Never, Beatrice replied without hesitation. You were never really a stranger, Lucas. From that first day when you stopped on that muddy road, I felt I knew your heart. She leaned in, pressing her forehead to his. The man who said then that child will have a father revealed himself completely in those words. I meant them, Lucas said softly. Every day since, I've tried to live up to them. You have, Beatrice assured him, and so much more. As winter settled over their homestead, bringing snow that transformed the landscape into a glittering wonderland, the small cabin was warm with love and purpose. Michael grew stronger daily, his eyes gradually changing from newborn blue to a rich brown like his mother's. Lucas continued his work at the ranch while expanding their own cattle herd bit by bit, planning for a future when he could work their land full-time. Christmas brought a letter from Grace in Boston, along with a tiny silver rattle for Michael and a promise to visit in the spring. The new year arrived with a blizzard that kept them housebound for 3 days' time. They spent playing with Michael, reading aloud to each other, and talking about their dreams for the future. I want more children, Beatrice confessed one snowy evening as they lay in bed, Michael sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby. Brothers and sisters for Michael, Lucas gathered her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. I'd like that too, a whole houseful if you're willing. I never expected this, Beatrice murmured against his chest. When my father cast me out, I thought I'd lost everything. I never imagined that losing everything would lead me to having everything that truly matters. Sometimes the darkest roads lead to the brightest destinations, Lucas replied philosophically. I'm just grateful our roads crossed when they did." As they drifted toward sleep, Beatrice reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought her here from shame and rejection to love and belonging. The child that had once been her disgrace was now her greatest joy, and the hasty marriage of convenience had become the deepest love she could imagine. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing their small corner of Nevada in pristine white. Inside, the little family slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Lucas, Beatrice, and Michael Young, a family forged not by blood or obligation but by choice and love. And in the years to come, as their family grew with the addition of 2 daughters and another son, as their homestead expanded into a prosperous ranch, as Michael grew into a young man who never questioned his place in his father's heart, Beatrice would often think back to that rainy day on a muddy Montana road, when a stranger on horseback had stopped and changed her life with simple words of decency. "Then that child will have a father." Words that had become a promise kept, a life redeemed, and a love that had found its way through the most unlikely of beginnings to the most beautiful of destinations.